Have you ever stood on a floor so beautiful it told a story? Across the ancient Roman world, mosaics weren't just decorations. They were masterpieces of art and engineering, intricate patterns of stone and glass that transformed ordinary spaces into breathtaking landscapes of myth and history. But what if these stunning works held secrets far deeper than anyone ever imagined? For centuries, we've admired their beauty while overlooking the possibility that hidden within those carefully arranged tiles might be messages, codes, and meanings waiting to be uncovered. Imagine walking through the ruins of an ancient Roman villa, your footsteps echoing across mosaics that have survived earthquakes, wars, and the passage of time. At first glance, you see gods and goddesses, heroic battles, and scenes of daily life, a visual feast of color and craftsmanship. But look closer, something doesn't quite add up. A pattern that seems just a little too deliberate, a symbol that appears out of place, a figure that might be more than it seems. Could these be intentional clues left by the artists? Could these mosaics be hiding stories that were too dangerous, too sacred, or too mysterious to speak aloud? This is the incredible world we're stepping into today, a journey into the hidden language of Roman mosaics. We're going to explore how these ancient artworks might contain coded messages, secret symbols, and even political or spiritual meanings that have eluded historians for generations. From cryptic geometric patterns to seemingly innocent images that may have served as signals or warnings, we'll dive into the evidence, the theories, and the fascinating questions that surround these ancient puzzles. So come with me as we unravel the mysteries buried beneath our feet and discover how the Romans may have been communicating in ways we're only just beginning to understand. To create these masterpieces, artisans relied on an astonishing variety of materials, each chosen for its color and durability. The most common element was stone or tesserae, cut into tiny cubes from local quarries. But they didn't stop there. To achieve a brilliant shimmer, they used glass, and for the most luxurious commissions, they incorporated precious materials like marble, gold leaf, and even semi-precious stones. This palette of colors allowed them to achieve incredible detail and realism. Think about the complexity of shading a human face or the subtle gradient of a sunset sky using nothing but tiny pieces of rock and glass. It was a meticulous and time-consuming process that required immense skill. The themes they chose to depict were a direct reflection of Roman life and beliefs. In public baths and forums, you would often find powerful scenes from mythology, the mighty Hercules performing his labors, or the tragic tale of Orpheus descending into the underworld. These were more than just decorations. They were conversations with the divine, reminders of the gods who governed their world. In the home, mosaics told a different story. Elaborate geometric patterns and floral designs adorned hallways, creating a sense of movement and elegance. But the most personal stories were saved for the dining room, the triclinium, where floors might feature a seemingly spilled cup of wine or scattered bones, a playful trick of the eye known as a sarotin, or unswept floor, designed to amuse and astonish guests. This art form was deeply woven into the fabric of Roman society, serving as a clear indicator of wealth, status, and cultural sophistication. A grand mosaic was a public declaration of one's importance and refined taste. In a world without mass media, these floors acted as a primary medium for storytelling and cultural education, visually narrating the myths, victories, and daily rituals that defined Roman identity. They were a constant underfoot gallery that everyone from the family to visiting statesmen would experience, making them one of the most democratic and influential art forms of the ancient world. Now let's turn our attention to the visual language itself, those geometric patterns that seem so decorative at first glance, the intricate knots, the endless meanders, the complex interlocking shapes, might be far more than just pleasing designs. To the modern eye, they are masterclasses in symmetry and order, but to a Roman viewer they could have been a symbolic code. The Greek key pattern, or meander, for instance, is often interpreted as a representation of infinity and the eternal flow of life, a concept deeply rooted in both Greek and Roman philosophy. A labyrinth pattern might not merely be a puzzle, it could symbolize a spiritual journey or the difficult path to enlightenment, a theme prevalent in mystery cults that were popular during the Empire. Then we have the powerful presence of mythological figures. A mosaic of Neptune wielding his trident wasn't just a pretty scene from a story, it was a direct invocation of the god's power, perhaps intended to protect a seaside villa from storms or to proclaim the owner's connection to maritime trade. But what about when these figures are depicted in unusual ways? Consider a mosaic from a house in Pompeii showing Alexander the Great in battle against the Persian king Darius. On the surface, it's a celebration of a famous military victory. However, placed in the home of a wealthy Roman, it might also have been a subtle political statement, aligning the homeowner with the strength and ambition of a great leader, or perhaps serving as a critique of contemporary politics. The image becomes a layered message, its meaning shifting depending on who is looking at it and in what context. Animals, too, are bursting with potential symbolism. A simple depiction of a dog could represent fidelity and protection, a common motif in floor mosaics that literally stood guard at the entrance of a home. But a more exotic creature like a parrot or a tiger was a blatant display of wealth and global reach, showing that the homeowner had access to distant, expensive imports. Some theorists propose that certain animal combinations could have acted as covert identifiers. A mosaic featuring a dolphin, a creature sacred to Neptune and a symbol of safe passage, alongside a ship, might have indicated that the home belonged to or was a safe meeting place for sailors or merchants. This transforms the artwork from a generic decoration into a specific sign, a silent signal understood by those in the know. Even the seemingly most straightforward scenes might contain hidden depths. A lavish banquet scene in a dining room could be a simple celebration of good living, or it could be a much more nuanced message about the homeowner's generosity and social status, a visual promise to guests of the hospitality they could expect. The specific foods shown, rare fruits, exotic game, were not just menu items. They were symbols of abundance and worldly knowledge. Every element, from the pattern on a border to the choice of a central figure, was a potential carrier of meaning, a piece of a larger, silent conversation embedded in the very floors they walked on. These mythological scenes were far more than just retellings of popular tales. They were a sophisticated language of allegory, a way to communicate complex ideas about power, virtue, and human nature without ever speaking a word. Take, for instance, the incredibly common depiction of Hercules and his 12 labors. On one level, it's a straightforward celebration of strength and heroism. But placed in the context of a Roman villa, the meaning deepens dramatically. For a wealthy patron, having Hercules on their floor could be a bold statement of their own moral fortitude and their ability to overcome great challenges, perhaps in business, politics, or even personal life. It aligned the homeowner with the ultimate Roman ideal of virtue through struggle, suggesting that their success was not just good fortune, but earned through Herculean effort. In a more public setting like a bath complex, an emperor might commission a Hercules mosaic to visually link his own reign to the demigod's divine strength and his role as a protector of civilization, a not-so-subtle piece of political propaganda embedded in the very ground where citizens gathered. The adventures of Odysseus offered another rich tapestry for hidden meanings. His long, arduous journey home from Troy was a story every Roman knew intimately, and its scenes were packed with potential for personal interpretation. A mosaic showing Odysseus tied to the mast of his ship, resisting the seductive song of the sirens, could serve as a powerful metaphor for the importance of perseverance and mental strength in the face of temptation. For a Roman businessman, this might reflect the daily temptations of corruption or laziness. The floor beneath his feet becomes a constant reminder to stay on course. Another scene where Odysseus cleverly outwits the Cyclops Polyphemus celebrates intellect over brute force. This could be a particularly appealing message for a self-made man who rose to prominence through his wits rather than inherited wealth or military power, a quiet declaration that brains truly are superior to brawn. Perhaps the most intriguing use of mythology lies in the choices that seem unusual or out of place. Why would a specific, obscure myth be chosen for a particular room? A mosaic of the god Bacchus, for example, was very common in dining rooms. While it obviously promoted a theme of celebration and wine, it might also carry a darker, more philosophical warning. The cult of Bacchus was associated with losing oneself in ecstasy and abandoning social order. In the context of a lavish banquet, the image could be a dual message, an invitation to enjoy life's pleasures, but also a cautionary reminder of the chaos that follows when those pleasures are taken to excess. This adds a layer of intellectual depth to the dinner party, transforming the floor into a conversation piece about moderation and the boundaries of civilized behavior. These allegories were not one-size-fits-all. Their interpretation was fluid, changing with the viewer and the context. A mosaic of the abduction of Persephone could be read as a simple seasonal myth about the origins of spring and winter. But for a family, it might also resonate as a story of loss, maternal grief, and eventual cyclical renewal, themes as relevant then as they are today. The true genius of these artworks is their layered nature. They could function as straightforward decoration, as a display of cultural knowledge, and as a deeply personal, symbolic statement all at once. They allowed the Romans to wear their values on their floors, to engage with philosophy and politics through art, and to embed the timeless struggles of humanity into the very fabric of their daily lives. But the use of mosaics for messaging wasn't confined to the personal or the philosophical. It was also one of the most powerful tools for political propaganda in the ancient world. For an emperor, controlling his image was paramount to maintaining power across a vast and diverse empire, and what better way to broadcast that image than literally underfoot in the most public spaces? These artworks became a permanent, inescapable form of mass media, reinforcing state-sanctioned narratives of strength, divinity, and benevolence. A stunning example of this can be found in the grand villa of Piazza Armerina in Sicily. While its exact ownership is debated, the sprawling complex features an incredibly long and detailed mosaic known as the Great Hunt. This isn't just a scene of capturing animals, it's a meticulous depiction of imperial power in action. It shows the complex logistics of procuring exotic beasts from distant provinces in Africa and Asia, transporting them across the sea, and delivering them to Rome for the games in the Colosseum. For any visitor walking that corridor, the message was unmistakable. The might of Rome, and by extension its emperor, reached every corner of the known world. The mosaic celebrated not just the hunt itself, but the entire engine of empire, the administration, the navy, the control over foreign lands, all working in perfect harmony to provide spectacle and affirm Roman dominance. Perhaps the most direct form of political propaganda was the imperial portrait. While more common in statues and coins, mosaic portraits of emperors and their families did exist, often in places of great importance. Imagine entering a provincial governor's palace and being greeted by a floor mosaic of the current emperor, his eyes fixed forward with an expression of calm authority. This was more than decoration, it was a calculated act of loyalty and a constant visual reminder of who held ultimate power. The emperor was not a distant figure in Rome, his image was literally embedded in the foundation of local governance. In the Byzantine era, this tradition evolved with breathtaking splendor. The Basilica of San Vitale in Ravenna contains one of the most famous mosaic political statements in history, the panels of Emperor Justinian and Empress Theodora. They are presented not as ordinary rulers, but in a radiant, almost holy light, surrounded by clergy and court officials. Justinian holds a golden paten, a bowl for the Eucharist, directly linking his imperial authority to the divine authority of the Church. He is both emperor and priest, the literal link between heaven and earth. Theodora, equally magnificent, holds a chalice, her image shimmering with gold and jewels. These mosaics were the ultimate fusion of political and religious propaganda, designed to leave no doubt in the viewer's mind that the emperor's right to rule was God-given and absolute. Even military victories, a staple of Roman art, were carefully curated for the floor. A mosaic celebrating a triumph wouldn't merely show a generic battle, it would be packed with specific symbolic details designed to tell a very particular story. The defeated enemies would be depicted in a certain way, often disorganized, their clothing identifying them as barbarians from a specific recently conquered tribe. The Roman soldiers, in contrast, would be shown in perfect formation, their standards held high. This visual dichotomy reinforced the idea of Roman order versus foreign chaos, justifying military expansion as a civilizing mission. For a wealthy patron who had perhaps helped fund a military campaign, commissioning a mosaic of a recent victory in his villa was a brilliant way to publicly align himself with the emperor's success, showcasing his patriotism and, not so subtly, his own influence and importance. In this way, the private home became an extension of the state's publicity machine, with the floor serving as a canvas for promoting loyalty, celebrating conquest and ensuring that every guest understood exactly where power resided and who was in its favor. Perhaps the most compelling evidence for coded messages lies in the spiritual realm, where mosaics transform from mere decoration into profound declarations of faith and sometimes into covert signals for survival. As the religious landscape of the Roman Empire shifted dramatically from paganism to Christianity, the imagery underfoot became a silent battleground for souls, a place where believers could proclaim their allegiance or hide it in plain sight. In the early days of Christianity, when followers faced persecution for their beliefs, openly displaying a cross was unthinkable, yet the human desire to express faith is relentless, and it found a way through the subtle language of art. Artists and patrons began embedding what scholars call crypto-Christian symbols into their mosaics. A common tactic was the use of the Christogram, formed by overlaying the Greek letters chi x and rho p, the first two letters of Christos. To a Roman official, this might look like nothing more than an abstract geometric pattern or a decorative wheel, but to a fellow Christian it was a blazing beacon of shared belief, a secret handshake made of stone and glass, identifying a home as a safe haven for worship. This practice of coding wasn't limited to symbols. It extended to seemingly pagan imagery that was reinterpreted with a new Christian meaning. A beautiful example is the figure of the Good Shepherd. In a traditional Roman context, a shepherd carrying a lamb on his shoulders was a common pastoral motif, a symbol of bucolic peace and simple life. But for early Christians, this same image became a powerful representation of Christ, the shepherd of men, who carries the lost soul back to salvation. A villa owner could commission a mosaic featuring this shepherd, and to any suspicious authority, it would appear utterly innocent, a classic scene of country life. But to the initiated, the message was clear and courageous. This is a house of faith. Similarly, the story of Jonah, swallowed by a great fish and then delivered, was a popular mosaic theme because it was seen as a prefiguration of Christ's own death and resurrection. These hidden narratives allowed communities to gather, worship, and find strength, all under the protective camouflage of conventional art. Of course, once Christianity became the official religion of the empire under Constantine, the mosaics didn't lose their spiritual power. They simply became more magnificent and direct in their proclamation. The floors of grand basilicas were covered with intricate theological diagrams and vivid biblical scenes, serving as a visual Bible for a largely illiterate population. But even here, a layer of symbolic coding remained. The style and placement of these images were meticulously planned to convey specific doctrines. In the Basilica of Santa Pudenziana in Rome, a 4th century mosaic shows Christ enthroned among his apostles, but he is depicted in the robes of a Roman teacher, a philosopher. This was a deliberate visual argument, positioning Christianity not as a fringe cult, but as the true heir to classical wisdom and the ultimate philosophy. The message was both spiritual and political. Our faith is the culmination of all that was good in Rome. This evolution from hidden code to glorious declaration shows the incredible adaptability of the mosaic medium. It began as a whisper among the persecuted, a way to say, "We are here," without saying a word, using the shared visual language of their time to create a secret network of faith. Then, as the danger receded, those same symbols burst forth in a triumphant shout of gold and color, covering the vast floors of churches to educate, inspire, and assert a new world order. In both its covert and overt forms, the spiritual mosaic was never just a picture. It was a participant in the great theological conversations of its age, a durable and eloquent witness to the deepest beliefs of the people who walked upon it. Moving from these grand imperial and spiritual narratives, we find some of the most relatable and potentially subversive messages hidden in scenes of ordinary life. While the floors of the wealthy were covered with gods and heroes, they also chose to depict the very human world around them, the farmer tending his vines, the hunter returning with game, the lively chaos of a marketplace. At first glance, these appear to be simple, nostalgic snapshots of daily routine, a celebration of the rustic virtues that Romans so often idealized. But if we read them as more than just decoration, a fascinating possibility emerges. Could these seemingly innocent scenes also contain subtle social commentary, quietly praising the working class or even critiquing the very inequalities that made such lavish art possible? Consider the incredibly common theme of agricultural labor. A beautiful mosaic from a wealthy villa might show a scene of plowing, planting, or harvesting, rendered with careful detail and obvious appreciation for the process. On one level, this is a celebration of the land itself, the source of the estate's wealth and the owner's prosperity. It paints the patron as a responsible steward of his property, connected to the timeless cycles of nature. But there's another layer. By placing images of hard, manual labor under the feet of reclining banquet guests, the mosaic creates a stark, silent contrast. The guests enjoy the fruits of that labor without engaging in its toil. This wasn't necessarily a critique, it was more likely a display of privilege, a visual reminder of the social order that placed the landowner at the top. However, the very act of immortalizing the worker could be seen as a backhanded form of praise, acknowledging that the entire luxurious lifestyle of the villa was built upon the backs of those whose efforts were so often invisible. The theme of the hunt offers another rich area for interpretation. A mosaic depicting a successful hunt, with dogs bringing down a stag or a hunter spearing a boar, was a classic symbol of masculine virtue and control over the wild. But these scenes often extended beyond the hunt itself to show the subsequent preparation, the butchering of the carcass, and the transport of the meat. This inclusion of the entire supply chain, much like the Great Hunt mosaic on a smaller scale, subtly emphasizes the complexity and organization required to maintain the villa's economy. It showcases not just the owner's martial skill, but his entire domain's self-sufficiency. For a visitor, the message was clear. Everything you see here, from the food on your plate to the art under your feet, is a product of this well-oiled machine, all owned and managed by the man who hosts you. Perhaps the most telling scenes of all are those found in the Roman latifundia, the massive agricultural estates. Some mosaics commissioned for these country villas go beyond generic farming scenes to show very specific, and sometimes surprisingly harsh, aspects of rural life. There are mosaics that depict the overseer or villicus managing the workers, a visual assertion of authority and control. Others show the processing of agricultural products like olive oil or wine, highlighting the estate's industrial output. In these instances, the mosaic functions less as art and more as a corporate logo and mission statement. It is a declaration of productivity and economic power, a constant reminder to everyone who entered that this was first and foremost a place of business, and a highly successful one at that. The beauty of the artwork serves to glorify the commerce that paid for it, blending aesthetics with accounting in a uniquely Roman way. This blending of the everyday with the symbolic reveals a society deeply conscious of its own structures and hierarchies. The choices of what to depict from daily life were never neutral. A mosaic was always a projection, an idealization, or a justification, whether it was showcasing the source of one's wealth, celebrating the rustic ideals that urban elites so often romanticized, or simply asserting control over a workforce. These floors were powerful tools for shaping identity and perception. They allowed the wealthy to narrate their own story, to define their place in the world not just through myth and conquest, but through the very bread on their table and the wine in their cups, turning the mundane into a permanent monument to their status and values. Now let's shift our gaze from the grand narratives to the building blocks of the mosaics themselves, the tiny, meticulously placed tesserae that form countless geometric and numerical patterns. Beyond their obvious decorative appeal, these intricate arrangements of shapes and numbers present one of the most tantalizing mysteries. Could these repeating motifs and deliberate counts be more than just artistry? Could they be a sophisticated form of cipher, encoding everything from sacred mathematics to the secret handshakes of exclusive clubs? The Romans were master engineers and organizers, and their love for order and system didn't end with their aqueducts and roads. It may very well be written into the very floors of their homes. Consider the mesmerizing effect of a complex geometric border. We see interlocking circles, precise tessellations, and infinite knots known as guillotch. While we admire the symmetry, a Roman viewer might have understood a deeper symbolic language. The repeated use of the hexagon, for instance, wasn't just a pleasing shape. In ancient thought, it was associated with harmony and balance, a shape found in nature's most efficient structures like honeycombs. A floor covered in hexagonal patterns could be a silent invocation of this natural order, a wish for a balanced and prosperous household. Then there's the labyrinth, a common mosaic motif, While it could simply be a playful puzzle, it also carried profound spiritual weight, symbolizing a difficult journey toward enlightenment or a ritual path walked by initiates in mystery cults. The path's twists and turns weren't random. They were a metaphor for the soul's challenging journey to a central, transformative truth. The potential for numerical codes is even more compelling. Mosaicists worked with a finite palette, often organizing their colors and patterns in specific, countable sequences. Researchers have begun to ask if certain recurring numbers hold significance. A border that consistently repeats a pattern of 8 elements might be a nod to the 8 winds of the Greco-Roman compass, tying the home to the cosmic order. A field of flowers totaling 12 could be a subtle reference to the months of the year or the signs of the zodiac, embedding a calendar right into the floor. In a world where many couldn't read, numbers were a universal language and their symbolic meaning was deeply ingrained in the culture. The number 7, sacred to the god Apollo, might be used in a room dedicated to intellectual pursuits. The number 3, powerful in many traditions, could signify completeness past, present, and future. Some of the most intriguing theories suggest these patterns served as identifiers for secret societies or trade guilds. In a bustling Roman city where different religious groups and professional collegia operated, displaying your affiliation openly wasn't always safe or prudent. A specific complex knot pattern known only to initiates of the Mithras cult could mark a home as a safe meeting place. A particular arrangement of cubes in a public bathhouse might indicate that the establishment was favored by a guild of shipbuilders, a hidden signal to fellow members. These geometric codes would be invisible to the average citizen but instantly recognizable to those in the know, functioning as a silent, secure network woven into the city's very architecture. Perhaps the most famous example of a potential geometric cipher is the Roman dodecahedron, a mysterious hollow bronze object with 12 pentagonal faces. Though not a mosaic itself, its perplexing design echoes the kind of mathematical precision we see in floor patterns. While we don't fully understand its purpose, its very existence proves the Romans were fascinated with complex geometric forms and likely ascribed great meaning to them. Translating this concept to mosaics, a complex pattern of pentagons and triangles could be an attempt to represent Platonic solids or other mathematical concepts considered to be the building blocks of the universe. For a learned Roman patron, having a floor that was not only beautiful but also a representation of divine geometry would be the ultimate display of wisdom and sophistication, a hidden layer of intellectual bragging rights for those sharp enough to decipher it. These silent stone codes challenge us to look beyond the image and see the calculation, to understand that for the Romans, beauty and intellect, art and science, were never separate pursuits but were forever intertwined in the patterns beneath their feet. While the grand images of gods and heroes capture our attention first, some of the most direct and personal messages are hidden in plain sight, woven into the borders and backgrounds of these floors in the form of written text. These inscriptions, carefully crafted from tiny tesserae in Latin or Greek, transform a beautiful image into a literal statement, offering us a rare and intimate window into the minds of the people who commissioned and created them. Often these texts are not glaring announcements but subtle additions, integrated into a decorative frieze or tucked alongside a figure, waiting for a literate visitor to lean in and read their secrets. One of the most common types of inscription is the signature. We might find the phrase "so and so made this" worked neatly into a corner. This wasn't just an artist's pride. In the highly competitive world of Roman artisanship, it was a form of branding, a permanent advertisement for the workshop skill that every guest of the home would see. In some cases, the inscriptions get even more specific. A mosaic from the North African province of Numidia includes a text that names not only the artist, but also the exact number of days it took to lay the floor and the precise area it covers, measured in Roman feet. This is more than just information. It's a boast of incredible efficiency and skill, a quantifiable claim of superiority meant to impress potential future clients who might see it. Beyond the artisan's signature, we find the voice of the patron. These inscriptions often take the form of a salute or a wish, a phrase like "Salve Lucrum" or "Hail, Prophet." Might border a mosaic in a merchant's house, a bold and unabashed celebration of commercial success embedded right into the foundation of his home. Another common greeting found in entryways is "Have a simple welcome to all who enter." This turns the floor into a permanent doorman, offering hospitality before a single word is spoken. These texts are powerful declarations of identity and values, telling us what the homeowner was most proud of, be it their business acumen, their generous nature, or their cultured taste. Perhaps the most fascinating inscriptions are those that speak directly to the viewer, creating a conversation across the centuries. A famous mosaic from Pompeii shows a skeleton holding two pitchers with the inscription, "Know thyself," a profound philosophical reminder of mortality and humility placed in a dining or entertainment space. It's a memento mori, a prompt for guests reclining at a banquet to enjoy life's pleasures but remember their own impermanence. In a similar vein, a mosaic from a triclinium might show a scene of a messy banquet with the text, "The leftovers are for the dog." This playful, almost humorous note directly engages with the visual trickery of the unswept floor, inviting laughter and conversation among the diners. These texts can also carry deeper, more personal emotions. In a mosaic from a Roman villa in Britain, a surrounding border contains a line from the poet Virgil. The choice of a specific quote from a revered author was a deliberate signal of the homeowner's education and refinement, a way to connect their domestic life to the highest ideals of Roman literature. It was a silent performance of culture for their guests. In other instances, inscriptions reveal heartfelt dedications. A floor might include the phrase, "To my sweet wife, this is for you," transforming a functional piece of home improvement into a lasting monument of love and affection, a message meant to be walked over by the family for generations but never forgotten. The placement of these words is itself a clue to their purpose. A name woven into the hem of a goddess's robe might indicate the patron who paid for the work, seeking a form of immortality by aligning themselves with the divine. A warning like "Cave Canaan, beware of the dog," positioned near an entrance, often alongside a mosaic of a ferocious hound, served a very practical purpose, blending text and image to protect the home. Each of these inscriptions, whether a boast, a welcome, a joke, or a piece of poetry, adds a layer of human voice to the silent art. They remind us that these were not anonymous creations but deeply personal projects, charged with the hopes, humor, pride, and philosophy of the real people who live with them underfoot every single day. But what if these intricate patterns of stone and glass were more than just beautiful stories or clever codes? What if they were, in a very literal sense, maps? The concept that some mosaics might have served as functional guides, directing initiates to hidden chambers or even providing coded escape routes, opens up a thrilling new dimension to their purpose. Imagine walking through a vast Roman villa, a labyrinth of rooms and corridors. The owner, perhaps a wealthy merchant or official with secrets to keep, couldn't simply post a sign pointing to his safe room or hidden strongbox. Instead, he might have commissioned a floor that did the job for him, silently and securely. A mosaic, after all, is permanent and incredibly difficult to alter without being noticed, making it the perfect medium for a lasting, discreet guide. Let's consider the layout of a typical elite Roman home, the domus. These were not open-plan houses. They were sequences of rooms arranged around central courtyards, often with secondary service corridors and private family quarters tucked away from public view. For a visitor, it could be easy to get turned around. Now picture a geometric mosaic in the main entrance hall. Scholars have proposed that certain repeating patterns, a specific sequence of shapes or a particular colored path winding through the design, might not be purely abstract. They could be a diagrammatic representation of the house's own layout. A line of darker tesserae meandering through a border could trace the path to the private family shrine, the lararium, a space of great importance that was not for public display. A cluster of distinctive red tiles in one corner might correspond to the location of the master's study, or more intriguingly, the entrance to a subterranean storage vault. The potential for this theory becomes even more compelling when we look at some surviving examples. In a villa in Antioch, a mosaic depicting a fantastical landscape includes a very precise, almost out-of-place representation of a winding path that leads toward a grove of trees. While it fits the overall pastoral theme, its unusual detail and specificity have led some archaeologists to wonder if it was a symbolic marker for a real physical feature on the estate's grounds, perhaps a secluded meeting spot or a hidden garden altar. Another mosaic from a house in Pompeii shows a detailed scene of the maze of the Minotaur. On the surface, it's another mythological episode. But placed in a specific hallway, could it have been a playful yet functional warning? The complex, confusing layout of the maze might have been a symbolic way of saying, "Do not proceed," or "This way leads to a dead end," effectively directing household traffic without a single word. The most dramatic application of this idea involves escape. In an era of political upheaval, betrayal, and house fires, a quick and discreet exit was a valuable asset. A mosaic that appeared to be a simple scene of Orpheus charming the animals with his lyre might contain a subtle clue, the direction in which the animals are gazing, or the path one particular creature is walking, could indicate the location of a concealed door leading to a service alley or a secret tunnel. This wouldn't be a giant X marks the spot, it would be a visual cue known only to the family and their most trusted servants. To any unexpected guest or potential intruder, it was just a beautiful picture. But to those in the know, it was a lifeline, a permanent safety instruction etched into the very foundation of their home. This theory transforms our understanding of these artworks from passive decoration to active participants in the daily function and security of a Roman household. The mosaic becomes a key, a blueprint, and a guardian all in one. It suggests a level of intentional design that goes far beyond aesthetics, embedding practical knowledge and clandestine information into the most beautiful and enduring canvas they had, the floor beneath their feet. This silent guidance system, hidden in the artistry everyone could see but only a few could truly read, showcases the Roman genius for combining utility, security, and breathtaking beauty in a way that continues to astonish us centuries later. Now let's turn our attention to one of the most visually striking yet subtly coded aspects of these mosaics, the language of color itself. To the Roman eye, color was never merely decorative. It was a rich and sophisticated symbolic system, with each hue carrying profound cultural, religious, and social meaning. The choice of a specific pigment was a deliberate decision that could completely transform the message of a mosaic, turning a simple image into a multi-layered statement. By understanding this chromatic code, we can begin to see these artworks not just as pictures, but as carefully constructed texts written in a vibrant spectrum of meaning. Take the color red, for instance. This powerful shade, often achieved with cinnabar or red ochre, was unequivocally linked to concepts of power, vitality, and the divine. When an emperor was depicted in a mosaic wearing a deep crimson toga, it wasn't just a fashion choice. It was a direct visual claim to imperial authority and military might, the color of Mars, the god of war. But red's meaning could shift dramatically with context. In a scene of a banquet, the red of the wine in a cup could symbolize lifeblood and celebration. However, that same rich red used in a depiction of a mythological scene, like the blood of a slain monster, could serve as a warning about the dangers of hubris or the price of victory. The material itself also mattered. The most expensive and vibrant reds derived from rare minerals were a blatant display of wealth, so a figure cloaked in brilliant crimson wasn't just powerful. The patron was also announcing that they were rich enough to afford the most luxurious pigments on the market. Blue and green offer another fascinating study in symbolic duality. True deep blue was exceptionally rare and difficult to produce in the ancient world, often requiring precious stones like lapis lazuli or complex Egyptian blue glass. Because of its scarcity and its association with the vast sky and the boundless sea, blue became the color of the divine and the eternal. A mosaic god like Jupiter or Neptune would almost certainly be framed by a brilliant blue background, setting them apart in a celestial realm beyond the mortal world. Green, predominantly made from malachite or green earth pigments, was the color of nature, growth, and fertility. A lush green landscape in a mosaic spoke of a prosperous and fertile estate, a well-managed paradise. But green also had a flip side, associated with the unpredictable sea and even with misfortune. A mosaic of Venus rising from the sea might use shimmering greens and blues to capture the beauty and the peril of the ocean from which she was born. This interplay between blue's divinity and green's natural power created a dynamic visual language for depicting the forces of the world. Perhaps the most telling use of color is found in the more subtle, secondary choices. The use of pure white, often from marble or limestone, could signify purity, light, and goodness. A figure dressed in white might be depicted as a virtuous hero or a pious priestess. Conversely, black, made from basalt or slate, was frequently associated with the underworld, death, and the unknown. A character like Hades, ruler of the dead, would be rendered in somber blacks and dark grays. But these interpretations were never absolute. A white dove symbolized peace, while a black crow could be an omen of bad news. The genius of the Roman Mosaicists was in their ability to use these color associations to guide the viewer's emotions and understanding. A scene of a happy harvest would be awash in warm golds, sunny yellows, and fertile greens, creating an immediate feeling of abundance and joy. A depiction of a tragic myth like the fall of Icarus might be dominated by the cold, unforgiving blue of the sea and the stark white of the sun, visually reinforcing the story's fatal outcome without a single word of explanation. This mastery of color symbolism allowed for incredibly nuanced storytelling. A mosaicist could use a slight shift in hue to suggest a double meaning or to highlight a particular figure's role. In a scene showing a triumphant general, everyone else might be rendered in more muted earthly tones, while the hero himself is bathed in a radiant gold leaf background, drawing the eye and signaling his semi-divine status. The variations in color quality from region to region also tell a story. A province with access to rare purple dye from the murex snail might use it in a mosaic to loudly proclaim its economic importance and connection to imperial trade networks. By reading the colors as carefully as we read the images, we unlock a deeper layer of communication, one that operated on an almost subconscious level for the ancient viewer, manipulating mood, underscoring themes, and embedding a complex code of meaning into every brilliant tile. And of course, the animal kingdom provided an endlessly rich symbolic vocabulary for the Roman Mosaicist, where creatures great and small were never just decorative elements but powerful carriers of meaning, each species acting as a kind of living allegory. The lion, for instance, was far more than a fearsome predator from a distant land. In the Roman worldview, the lion was the ultimate symbol of untamed power, imperial authority, and majestic courage. A mosaic lion guarding the entrance to a villa or a public bathhouse wasn't merely a pretty picture. It was a potent apotropaic device, a magical guardian meant to ward off evil spirits and ill fortune from crossing the threshold. This belief in the lion's protective power was so deeply ingrained that its image functioned as a kind of spiritual sentry. Yet, the lion's symbolism could pivot dramatically depending on its context. In a scene depicting a gladiatorial hunt in the arena, the lion represented chaos and the wild forces of nature that Rome had triumphantly subdued. Its defeat under the spear of a hunter or a gladiator was a metaphor for the empire's civilizing mission, the triumph of order over chaos. However, place that same lion at the feet of an emperor in a mosaic portrait, and its meaning transforms once again. Now the lion becomes a symbol of the ruler's own divine strength and ferocity in battle, a four-legged emblem of his rightful power to command and protect. The eagle or aquila held an even more elevated and unambiguous status. As the sacred bird of Jupiter, king of the gods, and the iconic standard of the Roman legions, the eagle was the undisputed symbol of the empire itself. Its appearance in a mosaic was a direct invocation of Roman power, piety, and victory. To depict an eagle with its wings spread wide, often clutching a thunderbolt in its talons, was to align the space, and by extension its owner, with the favor of Jupiter and the unstoppable might of the Roman military. This was not a subtle message. In a provincial governor's palace, an eagle mosaic would serve as a constant, imposing reminder of the imperial authority he represented. In a private home, it could be a bold declaration of the family's patriotism, their military connections, or their unwavering loyalty to the current emperor. The eagle's meaning was so potent and official that its use was likely carefully considered. It was not a symbol to be employed lightly, as it carried the weight of the entire state. Then we have creatures like the snake, whose symbolism was fascinatingly dualistic. A snake depicted coiled around a staff, as in the symbol of the god of medicine, Asclepius, was a benevolent emblem of healing, rejuvenation, and the life force, thanks to its ability to shed its skin. A mosaic featuring this motif in the floor of a home's bath complex or garden might express a hope for good health and longevity for the family, but the snake could just as easily represent danger, deceit, and the underworld. A mosaic of a snake lurking in the grass or poised to strike could serve as a clever visual pun or a warning. In a dining room, it might be a reference to the story of Cleopatra, a subtle conversational piece. In a hallway, it could be a symbolic caution to guests about treachery or a reminder to be watchful. This ability to embody both healing and poison, wisdom and danger, made the snake a uniquely versatile and potent symbol. Beyond these powerful icons, the entire animal world was mined for its allegorical potential. A faithful dog rendered in tessera at the entrance of a house was a universal symbol of fidelity and protection, a welcome for friends and a warning to foes. The depiction of a powerful bull was not just a farm animal, but a symbol of strength and ferocity, often linked to the god Mithras and his sacred rituals. Even birds were loaded with meaning. A peaceful dove represented love and the soul, while a wise owl, sacred to Minerva, signaled wisdom and strategic thinking. A peacock with its spectacular iridescent tail made from costly glass tesserae was a dramatic symbol of immortality and the heavens, as Romans believed its flesh did not decay after death. For a wealthy patron, investing in the expensive blue and green glass needed to create a peacock was a way to showcase their immense wealth while simultaneously proclaiming their hope for eternal life. This practice likely extended into the realm of personal totems or identifiers. Just as a modern company might have a logo, a Roman guild or a wealthy family might have been associated with a specific animal. A merchant who made his fortune shipping grain from Egypt might have dolphins, creatures sacred to Neptune and known for guiding ships, woven into the border of his floor mosaics. This would silently signal his profession and his reliance on the god's favor for his safe passage and prosperity. A mosaic of a particular breed of hunting dog might not be a generic symbol, but could represent the specific prized hounds owned by the family, a personalized emblem of their leisure pursuits and status. In this way, the animal kingdom provided a sophisticated, non-verbal language that allowed Romans to communicate their values, their fears, their professions, and their deepest hopes, turning their floors into a vibrant and symbolic menagerie that spoke volumes to anyone who knew how to look. Beyond the public displays of power and faith, the most tantalizing secrets may lie within the meeting places of Rome's infamous mystery cults, secretive religious societies that promised their initiates personal salvation and hidden knowledge of the universe. These groups, like the cults of Mithras, Dionysus, or Isis, operated in shadows and secluded spaces, and their mosaics were not for public admiration, but for the eyes of the enlightened few. Within these private sanctuaries, the floor itself became a sacred text, a visual guide to the cosmos and the soul's journey through it, encoded with symbols that only a member could fully decipher. The Mithric cult, particularly popular among Roman soldiers, offers a stunning case study. Their underground temples, or Mithria, were often small, cave-like spaces designed to feel like the cosmos in miniature. The centerpiece of almost every Mithraeum was a magnificent mosaic or painted scene depicting the central myth of the god Mithras slaying the primordial bull, an act known as the tauroctony. To an outsider, this is a powerful but seemingly straightforward image of a heroic deed. For an initiate, however, every single element was a dense allegory packed with astrological meaning. The scorpion that attacks the bull's testicles wasn't just a creepy detail. It represented the constellation Scorpio. The dog and snake lapping at the bull's blood corresponded to Canis Minor and Hydra. The entire scene was a sophisticated celestial map, depicting not an earthly event but a moment of cosmic significance. The act of sacrificing the bull was believed to have brought the ordered universe into being, and by meditating on this mosaic during their rituals, initiates were aligning themselves with this divine order and securing their own place within it. The mosaic was less a picture and more a diagram of salvation, a permanent altar that facilitated a spiritual connection to the mechanics of the heavens. Similarly, the Dionysian mysteries, which centered on the god of wine, ecstasy, and rebirth, used mosaic imagery to guide initiates through their transformative rites. A mosaic in a Dionysian meeting room might show a chaotic procession of maenads and satyrs, but within that chaos were specific, repeatable symbols. The theosis, a fennel stalk topped with a pine cone, was not just a staff, it was a phallic symbol of fertility and divine intoxication. A panther, often shown pulling the god's chariot, represented the untamed primal power that initiates would learn to harness through ritual. The most powerful symbol was the grapevine itself. Its cycle from growth to harvest to crushing and finally to fermentation into wine was a perfect metaphor for the initiate's own journey, the death of their old self through the ecstatic rites and their rebirth into a new state of spiritual awareness. Walking across a mosaic floor teeming with these symbols during a ritual likely served as a powerful mnemonic device, triggering the teachings and experiences associated with each image and reinforcing the secret knowledge that bound the group together. The placement of these mosaics was crucial to their function. They weren't just on the floor, they were integrated into the ritual space itself. In a mithraeum, the Torachne mosaic was always positioned on the far wall, directly in front of the initiates who would recline on raised benches along the side walls during their sacred meals. Their gaze would be constantly drawn to this complex cosmic code, a visual sermon they absorbed over and over. In a Dionysian context, a mosaic might be placed in the center of the room, forcing initiates to literally walk the path of the god's journey with every step. Some theories suggest that specific patterns or paths within these mosaics could have been used in initiation rituals, where a blindfolded newcomer was guided to step on certain tiles or follow a particular route, each step representing a new stage of understanding or a challenge overcome on the path to enlightenment. What makes these cult mosaics so fascinating is their duality. To the uninitiated, they might appear as merely exciting, slightly strange mythological scenes. But to the member, they were a direct line to the divine, a collection of inside jokes, profound truths, and sacred instructions. A mosaic of a ladder, for instance, might seem like a simple decorative motif. But in a Mithraic context, it represented the 7 rungs of spiritual advancement, each one corresponding to a planet and a grade of initiation within the cult. This transforms the artwork into a schematic of the entire belief system. These floors were the ultimate expression of belonging. Understanding their hidden language was proof that you were inside, that you possessed a truth that the outside world could not even see, even as it was literally laid out at their feet. Turning to the most intimate spaces of the Roman home, we find a genre of mosaic that speaks directly to the heart and the body. Scenes of Venus, the goddess of love, and her mischievous son Cupid were not merely decorative fantasies. They were a complex visual language used to communicate everything from hopeful prayers for fertility to sophisticated, and sometimes risque, statements about desire, marriage, and social status. In the private cubicula or bedrooms and within the secluded garden triclinia where couples dined, these images were far more than art. They were active participants in the emotional and social lives of the people who lived there. A classic example is the ubiquitous image of Venus emerging from the sea, born from the foam. While a beautiful myth, its placement in a bedroom was a potent invocation. It wasn't just a picture of a goddess, it was a prayer for divine blessing on the marriage bed, a hope for the beauty, grace, and generative power that Venus embodied. Similarly, Cupid wasn't just a cute winged baby. As the god of desire, his presence underscored the romantic and physical attraction that was an ideal part of a Roman marriage. A mosaic showing Cupid riding a lion or taming a dolphin was a powerful metaphor for love's ability to conquer all, to tame even the most wild and untamable forces of nature, and perhaps of human nature. For a newly married couple, this was an optimistic and empowering message to begin their life together. The theme of the wedding itself was a popular subject, and these scenes are where we can detect incredibly nuanced social messaging. A mosaic depicting the formal joining of hands, the dextrum iunctio, was a public declaration of a legal and socially approved union, often commissioned by the families to celebrate an alliance between powerful houses. But other scenes delve into the mythology of marriage with more layered intent. A common motif shows the god Hymenaeus, the divine embodiment of the wedding hymn, carrying his torch. This wasn't just a pretty scene. The torch was a symbol of the light of a new household being kindled, and its presence was a wish for the flame of the marriage to burn brightly and eternally. In a society where political marriages were common and love was not always the primary motivation, these images served to sanctify the union and project an ideal of harmonious partnership to the outside world. Yet not all amorous mosaics were about sanctioned love. The Romans had a frank and open attitude towards sexuality, and this is vividly reflected in their private art. Explicitly erotic scenes, particularly in the bedrooms of wealthy villas in places like Pompeii, have long fascinated and puzzled archaeologists. Were these simply ancient pornography, intended to inspire passion in the room? While that may be part of it, many scholars believe their function was also apotropaic, the belief that depictions of vigorous sexuality could ward off the evil eye and bring good fortune was widespread in the ancient world. By placing such a mosaic in the bedroom, The homeowners might have been seeking protection for one of the most vulnerable acts of life and for the fertility and health of the family line. For the elite, these depictions could also carry a hint of transgression and sophisticated humor. A mosaic from the Villa Romana del Casale shows a Cupid riding a sea creature in a way that is both playful and subtly suggestive. In the context of a dining room used for lavish parties, such an image could spark witty conversation and display the homeowner's worldly, even slightly daring taste. It's not difficult to imagine a scenario where a mosaic of Venus and Mars, the goddess of love caught in a secret affair with the god of war, was commissioned by a powerful man having his own extramarital adventures. To his peers, it would be a delicious and knowing inside joke, a public display of a private truth, all hiding safely within the framework of a well-known myth. The mosaic becomes a sophisticated wink, a way to boast of one's passions and conquests under the guise of respectable classical art, proving that even in love, the floors of Rome were never just telling one story. But not every message set in stone was meant to be grand or solemn. The Romans possessed a sharp wit and a love for satire, and this humor found a permanent home in their mosaics, offering a rare and wonderfully human glimpse into their world. These floors became a canvas for the playful, the absurd, and even the subversive, allowing artists and patrons to poke fun at society, authority, and themselves in a way that was socially acceptable because it was, after all, just a decoration. One of the most delightful examples of this is the unswept floor motif, the Sarotin. Imagine being a guest at a lavish dinner party, reclining to eat and looking down to see the floor littered with the remains of a previous feast, fish bones, chicken carcasses, nutshells, and fruit pits, all rendered with such incredible realism that you might almost believe the servants had neglected their duties. This was an elaborate visual joke, a testament to the host's wealth and generosity. So much food had been consumed that it created this artistic mess, and a brilliant display of the artist's skill in creating such a convincing illusion. It was a conversation starter, a piece of whimsy designed to amuse and astonish, showing that the Romans appreciated a clever trick and didn't take their opulent surroundings too seriously all the time. This playful spirit extended to caricatures and comic figures, often drawn from the popular theater of the day. Mosaics frequently depict grotesque, exaggerated, comical faces with distorted features, or characters from farces like the foolish old man or the cunning slave. These weren't just generic decorations, they were the ancient equivalent of cartoon characters, instantly recognizable and beloved for their humor. Placing a mosaic of a bald, pot-bellied, and lecherous old man in a dining room might have been a way for the wealthy homeowner to laugh at the stereotypes of aging and vice, a safe and humorous acknowledgement of human folly. In a more subversive context, a particularly unflattering caricature could be a veiled jab at a disliked public figure or a mocking commentary on the vices of the elite. Because it was couched in the familiar language of theater, the criticism was deniable. It was just a character from a play, after all. Who could possibly take offense? Some of the most intriguing potential satire involves the animal kingdom. A famous mosaic from Pompeii shows a dog, but not a noble guardian. This dog is caught in a moment of pure, undignified chaos, straining at its leash in a comical and futile attempt to chase something. Its expression is one of simple mind obsession, a far cry from the loyal and majestic creatures usually depicted. This feels less like a symbol and more like a portrait of a specific, badly behaved family pet, immortalized for its hilarious failings rather than its virtues. In another house, a mosaic panel depicts a cat that has just successfully stolen a precious bird from a cage, a scene of pure feline mischief frozen in time. For the owner, this might have commemorated a real frustrating event, but by having it turned into art, they transformed a moment of annoyance into one of enduring humor, a testament to the universal and timeless antics of our animal companions. The boldest use of this humorous language may have been in subtly mocking the powerful. While direct criticism of an emperor could be fatal, a more ambiguous image allowed for plausible deniability. A mosaic showing a pygmy engaged in a ridiculous battle with a crane, a common theme, could be enjoyed as a simple comic scene. But in the right context, perhaps in the home of someone dissatisfied with a recent military campaign, the image of a clumsy, ineffective little warrior might have taken on a sharper edge, serving as a quiet parody of the army's leadership or the emperor's boasts of easy conquest. The image was safe, but the interpretation could be deeply personal and satisfyingly critical for those who chose to see it that way. This ability to embed layered meaning, from simple fun to subtle social commentary, shows a sophisticated understanding of visual language. The mosaic floor, a permanent and very public part of the home, became a unique space where Romans could express their wit, their skepticism, and their joy in the absurd, proving that even in the most formal art, they never lost their sense of humor. Look up from the floor for a moment and consider the ceiling of the ancient world. The night sky, a vast and glittering map that the Romans believed dictated the fates of empires and individuals alike. This profound connection to the cosmos didn't just stay overhead, it was meticulously translated downward into the intricate patterns of their mosaics. We find entire floors transformed into celestial charts, where zodiac signs circle central figures and planets are arranged in precise, meaningful alignments. These weren't just decorative themes. For a Roman, they were potentially functional diagrams, a permanent horoscope set in stone, and a deeply personal negotiation with the forces of destiny. One of the most spectacular examples is the mosaic from the synagogue at Beit Alpha in Israel. Here, the entire floor is dominated by a breathtakingly complete zodiac wheel. The sun god Helios, radiant in his chariot, occupies the center, while the 12 signs of the zodiac, each labeled in Hebrew, form a perfect circle around him. The 4 seasons, personified as figures in the corners, complete this cosmic map. For the Jewish community that worshipped here, this wasn't a rejection of their faith, but a fascinating integration of the dominant Hellenistic Roman astronomical science into their spiritual space. The mosaic served as a complex calendar, marking the passage of time through the seasons and the movements of the heavens, a constant reminder that their lives and their rituals were part of a much larger, divine order. It was a visual sermon about God's creation, using the universal language of the stars that everyone in the Roman world understood. In a more domestic setting, a private villa might feature a mosaic of the planetary gods, but their arrangement was never random. A depiction of the 7 planetary deities, Saturn, Jupiter, Mars, Venus, Mercury, the Sun, and the Moon, could represent a specific astrological chart. Scholars theorize that such a mosaic might have been commissioned to commemorate a profoundly significant moment, like the birth of the family's heir. The exact position of each planet and the zodiac sign it occupied at that exact hour would have been calculated by an astrologer, and this celestial snapshot was then immortalized in the floor. This transformed the room into a sacred space aligned with the child's innate potential and destiny. Every time the parents walked across that floor, they were literally walking across a map of their child's soul and future, a permanent astrological record, and a magical attempt to secure the favor of the cosmos for their offspring. The choice of a specific zodiac sign for a particular room also reveals a layer of intentional design. A dining room, a place of abundance and celebration, might be adorned with a mosaic of Taurus the bull, a sign associated with earthly pleasures, good food, and material wealth. This wasn't just a pretty picture, it was an invocation of those very qualities for the guests who gathered there. Conversely, a library or study might feature Virgo, the sign linked to meticulous analysis, wisdom, and intellectual pursuit, creating an environment mentally attuned to scholarship. The mosaic acted as a kind of architectural subliminal message, using the agreed-upon symbolism of the stars to cultivate a specific atmosphere and encourage certain types of activity within the space. It was believed that being surrounded by these celestial influences could actually help manifest their associated traits. Beyond personal horoscopes and decorative themes, some mosaics may have functioned as actual astronomical guides. A complex geometric pattern of interlocking circles and precise angles might look abstract, but it could be a schematic diagram of planetary orbits or a representation of the harmony of the spheres, a philosophical concept that the universe's movement created a celestial music. For a learned Roman patron, having such a floor was the ultimate display of intellectual sophistication. It showed they weren't just wealthy, they were conversant with the most advanced scientific and philosophical ideas of their time. It was a permanent, underfoot testament to their understanding of the cosmos's mathematical beauty, a conversation piece that would dazzle educated guests who could recognize the patterns. This practice of encoding cosmic messages reflects the Roman world view itself, a belief in a universe where everything was interconnected, from the movement of a distant planet to the fate of a single person. The mosaic floor became the perfect medium to represent this connection, a microcosm of the macrocosm, a fixed point where the family below could align themselves with the swirling forces of destiny above. It was an act of both reverence and control, a way to capture a moment of celestial power and make it a permanent part of their home, ensuring that their lives were always in harmony with the music of the universe. While the gods ruled the heavens and emperors commanded legions, the true engine of the Roman world was commerce, a vast and complex network of trade that stretched from the misty shores of Britain to the spice markets of India. This pulsating economic life didn't just fund the creation of magnificent mosaics, it often became their central subject, transforming floors from mere decorations into sophisticated ledgers of wealth, advertisements for business, and perhaps even silent guides to the secrets of maritime trade. A mosaic depicting a merchant ship riding the waves wasn't just a pretty seascape. For a discerning eye, it could be a detailed statement of identity, a map of influence, and a bold declaration of how the homeowner's fortune was truly made. Consider the incredibly detailed scenes of commercial life found in port cities like Ostia, the bustling harbor of Rome itself. Here, mosaics frequently served as the signs for different trade guilds or corpora. The floor of a shipping magnate's office might feature a magnificent depiction of a robust cargo ship, its sail billowing, laden with amphorae. This wasn't generic. The specific type of ship, its rigging, its hull shape, could identify it as a vessel designed for the grain trade from Egypt or the olive oil run from Hispania. The amphorae themselves are telling. Their distinct shapes were like ancient barcodes, identifying whether they carried wine, garum fish sauce, or precious olive oil. This mosaic was a corporate logo, a visual resume, and a declaration of specialization. For any potential business partner walking into that office, the floor immediately established the owner's niche in the complex economy of the empire, building trust and credibility before a single word was spoken. This practice of economic signaling extended to the grand villas of the interior, far from the noisy docks. A wealthy landowner whose fortune came from vast agricultural estates wouldn't commission a mosaic of a random myth. He would choose a scene that glorified the source of his wealth. A common theme is the elaborate process of grape harvesting and wine production. We see laborers treading grapes in a vat, others transferring the must into large ceramic dolia for fermentation, and slaves sealing amphorae for transport. This isn't a celebration of rustic simplicity. It's a meticulous flowchart of a highly profitable industrial operation. By placing this on his floor, the landowner is making a calculated statement. He's showcasing the scale, organization, and productivity of his enterprise. He's not just a man of taste, he's a captain of industry, and every guest at his banquet is literally dining atop the proof of his economic power. The mosaic becomes a permanent prospectus, advertising the stability and success of his business to other elites, potential investors, or important political connections. The potential for these scenes to contain coded information is particularly compelling when we look at the specifics. A merchant who made his fortune importing exotic animals for the games might have a mosaic that seems to depict a standard lion hunt. But look closer, the landscape, the types of trees, the clothing of the animal handlers. These details could subtly point to the specific region of Africa where the animals were sourced, information that would be a valuable trade secret. A mosaic in a home in Pompeii shows a careful rendering of an Indian parrot, a rare and expensive luxury pet. This wasn't just a display of wealth, it was concrete evidence of the homeowner's access to long-distance trade routes that reached far beyond the boundaries of the empire. It signaled connections, resources, and a global reach that few could rival. In this context, the parrot is less a bird and more a living trademark for a successful import-export business. Perhaps the most direct form of economic coding can be found in the numerical patterns and symbols embedded within these commercial scenes. A border of a maritime mosaic might consist of a repeating pattern of waves and ships. Could the number of waves between each ship correspond to the number of days in a standard sea voyage between two ports? Could a specific number of amphorae stacked in a corner be a reference to the standard capacity of a ship's hold, a figure well known to fellow merchants but meaningless to an outsider? A mosaic showing a shepherd with his flock might seem bucolic, but if the flock numbers exactly 100 sheep, It could be a symbolic representation of the owner's actual herd size, a quiet boast of immense pastoral wealth. In a world without business cards or digital portfolios, these visual cues, woven into the art everyone could see, functioned as a sophisticated language of commerce, allowing Romans to communicate their economic status, their professional networks, and their sources of power with a subtlety and permanence that few other mediums could provide. Among the most compelling places to search for hidden messages are the mosaics commissioned by and for the military elite, in the homes of retired centurions, the headquarters of legions, and the meeting halls of veteran associations. Floors tell stories of conquest and camaraderie. But were these simply proud souvenirs of a life of service, or could they contain layered communications about strategy, allegiance, and the unspoken truths of military life? A mosaic depicting a famous battle like the legions of Rome overcoming a Germanic tribe served an obvious public relations function. It reinforced the narrative of Roman invincibility and the divine right to rule. However, for a veteran walking across that same floor, the details might evoke a very different, more personal response. The specific formation of the troops, the type of armor on the enemies, even the landscape itself could be a hyper-realistic depiction of a campaign he himself had fought in, a permanent memorial to his own lost comrades and narrow escapes. This transforms the artwork from generic propaganda into a deeply personal testament, a visual history that only those who were there could fully appreciate. The potential for these mosaics to encode actual tactical knowledge is a fascinating possibility. While the Roman military famously relied on standardized drill manuals, a visual aid could have been a powerful tool for instruction or discussion. Imagine a mosaic in a legionary commander's villa showing the testudo or tortoise formation, with shields interlocked in perfect detail. To a civilian, it's an impressive display of discipline. But to a junior officer, studying the precise angle of each shield and the placement of the soldier's feet could serve as a permanent training diagram, a constant reminder of the ideal to be achieved on the battlefield. More complex maneuvers like a cavalry envelopment or the strategic use of artillery could be visualized in ways that written words might struggle to convey. In an era before satellite imagery and sand tables, a detailed mosaic could function as a strategic map, allowing a general and his staff to plot movements and anticipate enemy responses by literally walking through the scenario laid out on the floor beneath them. Some of the most intriguing potential messages are those of allegiance and identity. A veteran who had served with a particularly distinguished legion, like the Legio Exfratensis or the Legio Roman II Augusta, might commission a mosaic featuring that legion's specific emblem, a bull, a capricorn, or a warship. This was more than regimental pride. It was a permanent declaration of belonging to an elite brotherhood. It signaled to any visitor, especially other former soldiers, that the homeowner was part of a network bound by shared experience and loyalty that transcended geography or time. In the politically volatile world of imperial Rome, such symbols could also be a careful signal of political loyalty. A mosaic celebrating the victories of a specific emperor, like Trajan or Septimius Severus, was a clear announcement of where the homeowner's loyalties lay, a wise precaution during times of civil war or succession crisis. It was a way to publicly align oneself with the winning side without having to say a word. Perhaps the most poignant hidden messages are not about glory, but about its cost. For every mosaic celebrating a triumph, there might be subtler references to the trauma and loss that are the universal currency of war. A scene of a soldier sharing a quiet moment with his horse, or a depiction of a funeral rites for a fallen comrade, carries an emotional weight that speaks to the veteran's experience far beyond the official story of victory. The inclusion of a specific deity like Mars Ultor, Mars the Avenger, in a veteran's home could be a deeply personal plea for justice for brothers who fell in an ambush or a failed campaign. These artworks become a form of therapy, a way to process the horrors of combat and memorialize the lost in a society that prized masculine fortitude and public stoicism. The mosaic floor in the privacy of one's own home became a sacred space where a retired soldier could finally acknowledge the full, complex truth of his service. The pride, the pain, the loyalty, and the loss, all encoded in the silent, enduring language of stone and glass. Walking from the grand public spaces into the private realm of the home and the quiet solemnity of the tomb, we find mosaics that speak in a whisper rather than a shout. Here, the grand narratives of gods and empires give way to the most intimate of human stories: love, family, loss, and the deep-seated desire to be remembered. These personalized floors were not crafted for the admiration of the masses, but for the eyes of a chosen few, serving as permanent, underfoot testaments to the bonds that truly defined a life. In a Roman bedroom, a portrait of the lady of the house was far more than decoration. It was a declaration of her central role within the domestic sphere, a celebration of her beauty and virtue intended for her husband's eyes alone. Similarly, a tomb mosaic was not merely a marker. It was a final, desperate embrace, a way to hold on to the memory of a loved one long after their voice had faded. These works reveal a side of the Romans we rarely see in their monuments and histories, not the conquerors or the philosophers, but the fathers, mothers, husbands, and wives. Using the most durable art form, they knew to etch their most tender feelings into eternity. The discovery of a realistic family portrait in a mosaic is a breathtakingly rare and intimate window into the past. One of the most moving examples comes from a villa in Mytilene on the island of Lesbos, where a 4th century floor depicts a woman of great elegance, her face rendered with delicate shading and a thoughtful expression. She is not a goddess or a mythical heroine, she is simply a matron, likely the mistress of the house. The artist has captured a specific person, not an ideal type. Her hairstyle is fashionable for the time, her jewelry is understated but fine, and her gaze is direct and calm. Placed in the private quarters of the home, this portrait was a permanent, loving homage. For her husband, it was a daily reminder of the woman he cherished. For her children, it was a constant image of their mother, an anchor of identity and belonging in the home. This was a deeply personal message of pride and affection, a silent but powerful assertion that the most important stories were not always those of legends, but the ones written in the faces of those we love. In the solemn space of the tomb, mosaics took on an even heavier emotional weight, transforming grief into something tangible and enduring. A poignant example is a child's tomb from the Vatican necropolis, which features a simple but heart-wrenching mosaic of a young girl. She is shown holding a dove, a universal symbol of innocence and the soul's peaceful flight to the afterlife. Inscribed beside her are the words, "To the well-deserving, who lived 6 years, 3 months, and 12 days." The specificity of her short life is itself a message of profound loss. Her parents counted every day they had with her. The mosaic does not show a grand mythological scene of the underworld. It shows their daughter exactly as they remembered her, frozen in a moment of tender simplicity. This was not art for public consumption. It was a private language of grief, a parent's last gift to a child, ensuring that anyone who ever entered that tomb would know she was loved, she was missed, and her brief life was worth recording down to the very day. Beyond portraiture, some of the most telling personal messages are found in the dedications and inscriptions woven into these private mosaics. A wealthy merchant might commission a floor for his estate showing a detailed scene of a ship laden with amphorae, but then have his name in a phrase like lucrum gaudium, profit is joy, set into the border. This is a far cry from the lofty ideals of mythological heroes. It is a proud, unashamed celebration of the source of his success and the personal satisfaction he derived from his business acumen. In a more touching vein, a husband might dedicate a mosaic to his wife, inscribing it with words of endearment. A beautiful example from a North African villa includes the phrase, "To my sweetest wife, who lived with me for 30 years without a single complaint." This goes beyond a simple signature. It is a public declaration of a successful marriage, a loving memorial to a partnership that was clearly a source of great pride and happiness for the man who commissioned it. The floor becomes a permanent wedding vow, a testament to a shared life that he wanted to be remembered long after they were both gone. These personalized mosaics were also powerful tools for crafting a legacy, for controlling how one would be perceived by future generations. A successful, self-made man who rose from humble origins to join the ranks of the local elite might commission a mosaic that cleverly referenced his journey. He might choose a scene of Odysseus, the ultimate resourceful traveler, or a depiction of a bountiful harvest, subtly alluding to the source of his wealth without explicitly stating his modest beginnings. For a family, a series of mosaics throughout their villa could tell a multi-generational story. The entryway might feature the founder of the family's fortune, perhaps shown as a merchant or a soldier. The dining room could celebrate the current generation's luxurious lifestyle, and a private chapel might include portraits of deceased ancestors, visually linking the living family to those who came before. This created a powerful sense of dynasty and permanence, a message to all visitors that this was not a new family of wealth, but one with a deep and respected history firmly embedded in the very structure of their home. Ultimately, these private messages and memorials reveal a universal human need that transcends time and culture, the desire to be seen, to be loved, and to be remembered for who we truly were. In the quiet moments away from the public eye, the Romans used their mosaics not to project power or piety, but to preserve the fragile, beautiful details of their personal lives. A child's smile, a wife's gentle nature, a husband's pride in his work, these were the truths they chose to set in stone. They understood that the most enduring legacy is not always written in history books carved from marble, but often in the countless tiny tiles of a mosaic, where a personal message of love or loss, meant for just a few eyes, can somehow, against all odds, speak to us across the centuries with a clarity and a humanity that feels intimately familiar. To truly understand the secret language of Roman mosaics, we must look beyond the borders of Italy to the vast and diverse influences that shaped Roman art itself. The Romans were magnificent synthesizers, absorbing and adapting ideas from every culture they encountered, and their mosaic floors became a vibrant canvas for this cross-cultural conversation. When you see a Roman mosaic, you're rarely looking at a purely Roman creation. You're witnessing a complex dialogue with Greek mythology, Egyptian deities, and Eastern mystery cults. But was this simply a fashionable display of cosmopolitan taste, or could these imported motifs have been a sophisticated way to communicate allegiance, wisdom, and even secret identities in a vast, multi-ethnic empire? The Greek influence is the most obvious and pervasive. Roman elites were utterly captivated by Greek culture, or paideia, considering it the pinnacle of civilization and learning. It was almost unthinkable for a wealthy Roman's villa to lack a mosaic depicting a scene from Homer's Odyssey or the labors of Hercules. On one level, this was a clear signal of education and refinement, a way to show guests that the homeowner was a man of sophisticated, Hellenized taste. But these myths were more than just decorative flashcards of cultural knowledge. By choosing a specific Greek hero, a patron could be making a very personal statement. A mosaic of Odysseus, the cunning and resilient wanderer, might resonate deeply with a Roman senator who had served abroad in numerous provincial postings, seeing his own life of diplomatic travel and intellectual challenges reflected in the epic. Alternatively, a depiction of the philosopher Plato surrounded by his students in an academy wasn't just a school scene. It could signal the homeowner's affiliation with a particular school of philosophical thought, perhaps even hinting at private intellectual gatherings held within those very rooms. The Greek image became a shortcut to expressing a complex intellectual identity. Venturing further east, the incorporation of Egyptian symbols reveals an even more layered intent. The goddess Isis, with her cult of resurrection and sacred magic, experienced enormous popularity throughout the Roman world. A mosaic featuring Isis, often recognizable by her distinctive knotted garment and holding a sistrum, was a powerful declaration of faith for her initiates. But in the context of a Roman home, it could also be a bold political statement. The Ptolemaic rulers of Egypt had successfully linked themselves to Isis, and later, Roman emperors like Vespasian and Caracalla openly venerated her to strengthen their ties to this wealthy, grain-rich province. Therefore, a private citizen commissioning an Isis mosaic might be doing more than expressing personal piety. He could be carefully aligning himself with imperial religious policy, signaling his loyalty to an emperor who favored the Egyptian goddess. It was a safe way to display political allegiance through the acceptable medium of personal devotion. Perhaps the most tantalizing cross-cultural references are those that point to the secretive world of Eastern mystery cults, such as Mithraism. The god Mithras himself originated in Persia, and his rituals, which promised salvation to his all-male initiates, were conducted in underground temples called Mithraea. These spaces were often adorned with intricate mosaics depicting the central myth of Mithras slaying the cosmic bull. To an outsider, this might look like a simple, albeit dramatic, hunting scene. But for the initiated, every element was a complex astrological and theological code. The dog, the snake, the scorpion, and the raven all corresponded to specific constellations, and the entire image was a map of the soul's journey to enlightenment. A wealthy Roman who was a patron of a local mithraeum might have elements of this symbolism subtly integrated into the mosaics of his own home, not the full secret scene, which would violate his oath of secrecy, but perhaps a border of specific celestial patterns or a depiction of a raven. To a fellow initiate visiting the house, these would be instantly recognizable signs, a silent handshake that identified the home as a safe space for those who shared this profound secret. The mosaic became a discreet badge of membership in an exclusive spiritual club. This blending of traditions also served a fascinating diplomatic purpose, especially in the cosmopolitan port cities of the empire like Ostia or Alexandria. A merchant who dealt with clients from across the Mediterranean might commission a mosaic that intentionally combined elements from different cultures. He might have a central panel showing the Roman god Neptune, but the surrounding border could feature Greek tridents and Egyptian lotus flowers. This wasn't a confused jumble, it was a brilliant, non-verbal business strategy. It communicated to every foreign trader who entered his home that he understood their culture, respected their gods, and was a trustworthy and worldly partner. In a sense, his floor became a visual passport, putting everyone at ease and facilitating commerce by showcasing a shared, hybrid identity. The artwork transcended decoration to become a tool for building trust and bridging cultural divides in a vast and diverse empire, proving that sometimes the most important messages aren't hidden in code, but are displayed openly for those from every background to understand and appreciate. So how do experts even begin to unravel these potential puzzles set in stone? Decoding these messages isn't about finding a single Rosetta Stone that cracks everything open at once. Instead, historians and archaeologists act like detectives at a massive, intricate crime scene, piecing together clues using a sophisticated toolkit of methods designed to separate coincidence from intentional design. The first and most fundamental tool is comparative analysis. A researcher might find a peculiar symbol in a mosaic in Britain, say, a specific arrangement of a dolphin and a trident. Their first step is to scour databases and excavation reports from across the entire former Roman Empire, looking for that exact same combination. If that same motif shows up repeatedly in the coastal villas of wealthy shipowners in Italy and North Africa, it starts to look less like an artist's whimsy and more like a recognized symbol for a maritime business or a prayer for safe voyages. This method builds a visual dictionary, allowing experts to see patterns and connections that were invisible when looking at each mosaic in isolation. It's a painstaking process of building a case, one tiny tessera at a time. Context is absolutely everything in this investigation. Where a mosaic is located within a building can completely change its potential meaning. A depiction of the god Bacchus in a public bathhouse might be a generic celebration of relaxation and pleasure, but that exact same image of Bacchus found in a home's private dining room takes on a much more intimate and potentially layered significance. Archaeologists meticulously mapped the floor plan of the entire structure, noting which rooms were public reception areas, which were private family quarters, and which were service corridors. They asked critical questions. Who was the intended audience for this image? Was it meant to impress clients, entertain dinner guests, or serve as a private devotional focus for the family alone? The social status of the homeowner, gleaned from the size and grandeur of the villa itself, provides another crucial clue. A complex geometric pattern in the home of a mid-level merchant might be decorative, but that same pattern in the palace of a known senator with connections to Eastern mystery cults could be a candidate for a coded spiritual message. The mosaic is never interpreted in a vacuum. Its story is woven into the very walls that surround it. In recent decades, technology has supercharged this detective work, allowing experts to see the unseen. One of the most powerful new tools is multispectral imaging. This technique involves photographing a mosaic using light from beyond the visible spectrum, including ultraviolet and infrared. Why is this so revolutionary? Because the passage of centuries, including dirt, ash, and mineral deposits, can obscure crucial details that were once obvious. A faint inscription around a border might be completely invisible to the naked eye, but under infrared light, the different chemical composition of the tiles used for the text can make it leap out clearly. This technology can also reveal the subtle, underlying sketches that artists drew directly onto the mortar before laying the tiles, giving us a direct window into their creative process and intentional design choices. In some cases, it can even detect traces of pigments that have now completely faded, showing us that a mosaic we see today in muted earth tones was originally a riot of vibrant color, which completely changes its emotional impact and symbolic weight. Of course, this work is filled with significant challenges and healthy debate. The greatest hurdle is what scholars call the tyranny of coincidence. Humans are pattern recognition machines, and we're hardwired to see meaning and intention even where none exists. A crack in the mortar that happens to form a straight line might be mistaken for a deliberate guide. A random scattering of red tiles in a geometric field might be interpreted as a hidden number. Historians have to constantly guard against this tendency, applying rigorous skepticism. For every proposed secret code, they must ask, is there enough repetitive evidence across multiple sites to suggest a shared understanding? Could this pattern be explained by the practical constraints of the artist's workshop or a simple aesthetic choice? The line between a profound hidden message and a beautiful decoration is often incredibly fine, and the academic community thrives on this debate, with theories being proposed, challenged, and refined over decades. Yet the breakthroughs are incredibly compelling. For instance, the systematic study of borders has revealed that what were once dismissed as simple, repetitive frames are often where the most personalized messages were placed. The consistent identification of artist signatures and patron names in these areas has turned them into a rich source of historical data. Another breakthrough has been the reevaluation of so-called monster mosaics floors that seem to be a jumble of different animal and mythological parts. Where once they were seen as just chaotic decoration, some historians now argue they could be sophisticated allegories for the vastness and diversity of the Roman Empire itself, or even symbolic representations of the homeowner's control over the chaotic forces of the world. Each technological advance and each new comparative discovery adds another piece to the puzzle, allowing us to listen more clearly to the whispers of the past, not by finding a single key, but by patiently learning the intricate grammar of a silent language written in stone and glass. Now let's focus on some of the most famous and debated mosaics where these theories of hidden meaning are put to the test. Perhaps no mosaic is more iconic than the immense Alexander mosaic, unearthed from the House of the Faun in Pompeii. This breathtaking floor captures the climactic moment of battle between Alexander the Great and the Persian king Darius III. At first glance, it's a masterclass in dramatic tension and realistic detail. You can almost hear the clashing spears and panicked horses. But why was this epic scene of Greek history, a moment that happened centuries earlier, the centerpiece of a wealthy Roman's home in an Italian town? The straightforward interpretation is that it showcased the homeowner's sophisticated taste and knowledge of classical history, a must-have for any elite Roman wishing to display their Hellenistic education. However, many scholars believe the message was far more potent and contemporary. Pompeii in the 1st century BC was a Roman colony, but it was originally a Greek city, and that cultural pride still ran deep. By placing this mosaic in his home, the owner could have been making a powerful statement about local identity, celebrating a glorious Greek victory over a vast Eastern empire. Even more intriguingly, some historians see a direct political parallel. The Romans themselves were frequently at war with Eastern powers, namely the Parthians. This mosaic could have served as a not-so-subtle piece of propaganda, visually linking the current Roman struggle to Alexander's legendary triumph, implicitly casting their modern enemies as the new Persians, destined to lose force against the superior order of the West. The intense emotional focus on the fear and desperation on Darius's face, contrasted with Alexander's unwavering determination, drives this message home, transforming a historical recreation into a compelling argument about power and destiny. Moving from the battlefield to the mystical, the Villa of the Mysteries in Pompeii presents one of the most mesmerizing and controversial puzzles. This villa boasts a series of stunning frescoes, but its floors hold secrets too, and the overall decorative scheme is a key part of the mystery. The main room features a breathtaking frieze that seems to depict the initiation of a young woman into the Dionysian mysteries, a secretive cult centered on the god of wine, ecstasy, and rebirth. The scenes are charged with symbolism: a winged figure wielding a whip, a devotee uncovering a sacred object, and ecstatic dancing. The theories here are incredibly diverse. The traditional view is that this is a literal depiction of the initiation rites for the cult of Dionysus, a rare and detailed visual guide to ceremonies that were always conducted in strict secrecy. The owner of the villa may have been a high priestess or a devoted member, and this room could have been the actual space where these rituals were performed, with the artwork serving as both instruction and sacred backdrop. But other interpretations are more psychological. Some argue the sequence is allegorical, representing the journey of a young Roman bride preparing for marriage, moving from the innocence of girlhood through the trials and revelations that lead to her mature role as a wife and mother. The divine frenzy of Dionysus becomes a metaphor for the powerful and sometimes terrifying transition into adulthood and the responsibilities of a matron. The true meaning is likely a complex blend of both, a deeply personal spiritual declaration that also fit within the social expectations for a woman of high status. It's a powerful reminder that the most enigmatic messages were those meant for a very small, initiated audience, their full significance forever locked away with them. For a clearer example of political messaging, we can look to the Grand Villa Romana del Casale in Sicily. This sprawling imperial estate is a treasure trove of mosaics, but one corridor stands out, the famous Corridor of the Great Hunt. This isn't a depiction of a casual sport, it's a sprawling, cinematic narrative of the imperial machine in action. It shows the capture of exotic animals from the farthest reaches of the empire, Africa and India, their transport across the sea, and their delivery to Rome for the games in the Colosseum. This is raw imperial propaganda on a monumental scale. The message is one of absolute control and global dominance. It illustrates the relentless efficiency of Rome, its reach extending to the most remote corners of the world to bring back living trophies for the entertainment of its citizens. The emperor, likely the one who commissioned this villa, is visually proclaiming his power as the ruler of the entire known world, a provider of spectacular wonders. Every official or guest who walked this corridor will be left with an overwhelming impression of the regime's strength and organizational might. Yet even here, there might be a quieter, more human message. Some art historians point to the detailed, almost empathetic rendering of the animals themselves, their fear, their struggle. This could be a subtle nod to the immense cost of this imperial project, a silent acknowledgement of the chaos and violence required to maintain the spectacle of power, adding a layer of poignant commentary beneath the boastful surface. Finally, the mosaic of the unswept floor from the Aventine Hill in Rome offers a different kind of mystery, one of humor, illusion, and social signaling. This masterpiece of trompe l'oeil depicts the scraps left after a grand banquet: fish bones, chicken claws, nutshells, and fruit rinds, all rendered with astonishing realism. On one level, it's a fantastic joke, a display of the artist's incredible skill in making stone look like garbage. It was a guaranteed conversation starter, amazing and amusing guests. But the message goes deeper. This apparent mess is actually a blatant display of extreme wealth. The variety and quality of the food debris, lobster claws, expensive imported fruits, signal that the host could afford such an extravagant feast that this much luxury could be casually discarded. It was a way to boast about one's abundance without appearing boastful. The statement was made by Chinese letter waste itself. Furthermore, the theme was a clever reference to a much earlier Greek original by a famous artist, Sosus of Pergamon. By commissioning it, the Roman homeowner wasn't just buying a cool floor, he was displaying his knowledge of art history and his cultured taste, aligning himself with the Hellenistic elite. The mosaic is a multi-layered message. It's a technical marvel, a witty joke, a symbol of immense wealth, and a badge of intellectual sophistication, all pretending to be a simple mess on the floor. These famous examples show us that decoding a mosaic is never about finding one single answer, but about appreciating the fascinating interplay of personal identity, political ambition, spiritual belief, and sheer artistic genius that could be embedded in a few square feet of stone. The fascination with these ancient codes hasn't faded. It has been supercharged by modern media, which often takes the tantalizing possibilities we've explored and transforms them into thrilling narratives for a global audience. Books like those in the historical thriller genre frequently use a hidden mosaic message as the central MacGuffin, that sends the protagonist on a dangerous quest. A novelist might imagine a geometric pattern that isn't just symbolic, but is an actual map to a lost imperial treasury or a heretical text, turning an archaeological curiosity into the key that unlocks an earth-shattering secret. This dramatization, while fictional, does something incredibly important. It captures the public's imagination and introduces these ancient artworks to people who might never step foot in a museum, framing history not as a dry academic subject, but as a living, breathing mystery waiting to be solved. Video games have become a particularly powerful medium for bringing this concept to life, allowing players to literally step into the role of a decoder. In games like the Assassin's Creed series, which often features meticulously recreated historical settings, players might be tasked with examining virtual mosaics for clues, aligning perspectives to reveal hidden symbols, or using a protagonist's special vision to see layers of meaning invisible to the naked eye. This interactive experience is more than just entertainment. It's a form of immersive education that teaches players about the visual language and symbolism of the ancient world through direct engagement. While the game's plot involving ancient conspiracies is pure fantasy, the act of carefully observing architectural details and interpreting visual cues mirrors the very real process historians use to analyze these artifacts. It trains a new generation to look at ancient art with a critical and curious eye. The influence flows in both directions, however. Popular media doesn't just interpret archaeology, it can sometimes inspire it. A compelling theory presented in a best-selling novel or a highly watched documentary series can generate widespread public interest and, consequently, funding for new research. A filmmaker's speculative connection between a mosaic pattern and a specific celestial event might prompt an astronomer to run new simulations, checking if the stars did indeed align that way on a significant date. This crossover between popular culture and academic pursuit creates a vibrant feedback loop where creative speculation meets rigorous scientific method. While most fictional plots are dismissed, they occasionally ask a what-if question so intriguing that it pushes scholars to examine the evidence from a fresh angle, testing a hypothesis they might never have otherwise considered. Of course, this relationship has its pitfalls. The biggest challenge for experts is combating the spread of sensationalized or outright false information. A movie might present a far-fetched theory about a mosaic predicting a modern-day apocalypse with such conviction that it becomes ingrained in public belief, despite having zero basis in fact. This places historians and archaeologists in the difficult position of having to debunk exciting myths with often complex and less glamorous truths. Their work involves patiently explaining that while a symbol might look like a spaceship to us, it held a completely different, well-documented meaning in its original cultural context. The goal isn't to ruin the fun, but to ensure that our understanding of the past is built on evidence rather than fantasy, all while acknowledging the undeniable allure of the unknown. Ultimately, this interplay between modern media and ancient art ensures that Roman mosaics remain relevant and captivating. They are no longer static relics confined to textbooks, but dynamic elements of our collective storytelling, constantly being reimagined and reinvested with meaning. Whether it's through the pages of a thriller, the controller of a game, or the lens of a documentary, these ancient puzzles continue to challenge and charm us, proving that the human desire to find patterns and uncover secrets is a timeless pursuit, one that connects us directly with the very people who laid these stones centuries ago. Ultimately, these silent conversations set in stone matter today because they completely reshape our understanding of the ancient world. We often picture the Romans as conquerors and engineers, masters of the tangible of roads, aqueducts, and laws. But the hidden language of their mosaics reveals a society equally sophisticated in the intangible realms of symbolism, subtext, and shared meaning. This wasn't a culture that communicated only through edicts and speeches. They were masters of visual poetry, using their floors to weave complex tapestries of identity, belief, and ambition. Decoding these messages allows us to hear the whispers of individuals lost to time, the merchant proud of his trade, the mother grieving her child, the veteran honoring his brothers in arms. It transforms history from a study of grand events into a deeply human story, connecting us across the millennia to the universal desires to be understood, to belong, and to leave a mark that says, "I was here." This pursuit also highlights a breathtaking continuity in human creativity. The drive to embed secret messages to create art that operates on multiple levels for different audiences is not some quaint ancient practice. It is a fundamental part of how we communicate today. The Roman artisan using a specific number of tiles to reference a zodiac sign is engaging in the same creative impulse as a modern filmmaker hiding Easter eggs for attentive fans, or a musician weaving cryptic lyrics that reward deep listening. The wealthy patron commissioning a politically charged mythological scene was participating in a form of social signaling that any user of social media would instantly recognize. By recognizing these ancient codes, we see that our modern obsession with layered meaning and in-group symbolism isn't new at all. We are simply using new tools to express a very old human need to communicate in ways that are nuanced, personal, and sometimes deliberately concealed from the wider world. Furthermore, this decoding process is a powerful testament to the importance of interdisciplinary study. Cracking these codes didn't come from a single archaeologist with a brush. It required the combined efforts of art historians, astronomers, philologists, materials scientists, and cultural anthropologists. A chemist's analysis of pigment sources can tell us about trade routes that funded a mosaic, which an historian can then cross-reference with records of a patron's business interests. An astronomer's software can recreate the night sky on a specific date, revealing that a celestial mosaic might commemorate the birth of a child. This collaborative effort is a beautiful model for how we can approach the complex puzzles of our own time, demonstrating that the biggest mysteries are never solved in isolation, but through the convergence of diverse minds and fields of expertise. Engaging with this mystery also fosters a more active and rewarding relationship with our shared cultural heritage. Walking through a museum or an ancient ruin becomes an entirely different experience when you know to look for these clues. Instead of passively observing a beautiful floor, you become an active participant, leaning in to examine a border for a hidden inscription, studying the choice of animals for potential symbolism, or considering the room's function in relation to its imagery. This knowledge turns every visit into a potential discovery, empowering us to see beyond the surface beauty and connect with the intentions of the people who created these spaces. It cultivates a deeper sense of empathy and curiosity, reminding us that the artifacts we preserve are not just objects, but conversations waiting to be resumed. In the end, the greatest significance of these secret messages may lie in the simple, profound truth they reveal, that people of the past were as complex, witty, and nuanced as we are. They loved, they joked, they worshipped, they boasted, and they feared. They found clever ways to navigate political turmoil, express forbidden beliefs, and memorialize their personal lives. By patiently unraveling the codes in their mosaics, we do more than just solve historical riddles. We bridge a gap, recognizing our own reflections in the polished stones of their floors. This ongoing dialogue with antiquity enriches our present, offering timeless lessons in creativity, resilience, and the enduring power of a story well told, especially when that story is hidden in plain sight for centuries, waiting for someone to finally look down and understand. So as we've journeyed together across these intricate floors, from the grand mythological declarations to the quiet, personal whispers set in tile, one thing becomes beautifully clear: Roman mosaics were so much more than decoration. They were a dynamic, layered language. They were a way to boast of wealth and power without saying a word, to profess a forbidden faith under the noses of authorities, to guide a visitor through a hidden door, or to forever memorialize the face of a loved one. We've seen how a simple geometric border might hold a cosmic code, how a depiction of a hunt could be a detailed business ledger, and how a scene from a Greek myth might be a sharp commentary on contemporary politics. These floors were the ancient equivalent of a multi-layered social media profile, a personal diary, and a corporate logo, all fused into one breathtaking piece of art. The enduring fascination with these puzzles lies in their beautiful incompleteness. For every theory we can support with comparative evidence, for every inscription we can now read with multispectral imaging, there are a dozen more symbols and patterns that continue to guard their secrets fiercely. This isn't a failure of archaeology, it's what makes the subject so alive and endlessly engaging. That tantalizing gap between what we can prove and what we can only wonder about invites us all to become detectives, to lean a little closer and look a little longer. It connects us directly to the ancient viewers themselves, who would have understood these nuances instantly. We are, in a way, learning to see through their eyes, to understand the jokes, the prayers, and the pride that they walked over every single day. This isn't just a story confined to history books or distant ruins. It's a living conversation that continues in museums and archaeological sites around the world. The next time you have the chance to visit a museum with a classical collection, I urge you to seek out these mosaics. Don't just glance from a distance. Get as close as the guards will allow and really look. Examine the tiny tesserae, see the variations in color and stone, and try to spot the patterns in the borders. Look for the faces in the portraits and the stories in the scenes. You might not decipher a secret code on your first visit, but you will undoubtedly feel the presence of the people who commissioned this art, their hopes, their humor, and their desire to send a message across time. And if you do have a theory about a mosaic you've seen, or if this deep dive has sparked a new curiosity, I would absolutely love to hear about it. Share your thoughts and discoveries in the comments below. Let's continue this investigation together, because the floor, as it turns out, is still speaking.